Hello and welcome to the Plugged In Show. I'm Paul Acey. It's a bird. It's a plane. Nope, it's just another Superman movie flying into theaters. That's right, the daddy of all superheroes is back, righting wrongs, knocking around bad guys, and fighting for truth, justice, and as tradition would have it, the American way. But does all that truth and justice stuff make Superman a little boring? Is the Man of Steel a man out of step with our own more cynical times? Two superfans, Bob Hoose and Brett Eckleberry, give us their takes, and I chime in with my own. And then we'll talk a bit about Mario Kart.
Vroom, vroom, vroom.
Now, Mario Kart has been around for a bazillion years, roughly, but it is the newest game on the newest Nintendo platform, the Nintendo Switch 2. So Bob Hoose, our game expert, will tell us all about this new old game and tell us if there's any new problems with it. And then a little later in the show, we will reveal a secret. No, it's not Superman's secret identity because, of course, we know that already. It's Bob Hoose.
Yeah.
But but the secret will land a little closer to home. So clearly it's going to be a big show. So now it's up, and away. And in honor of Superman's Arctic Fortress of Solitude, let's do a little ice breaking. So, the new Superman movie, which is coming out this Friday, is apparently loaded with lots and lots of bad guys. Lex Luthor is the main guy, but there's about 15 others, it seems like.
Yeah, and oddly, bad guys that weren't even in the comics. I mean, they're just bad guys they just sort of made for this movie.
So go figure, you know? But and that's kind of strange because, you know, Superman he doesn't have the rogues gallery that Batman probably does,
Sure.
But he does have some pretty interesting villains.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I'd like you guys to tell me what your favorite Superman villain is without counting Lex Luthor.
Right.
So, Mr. Hoose, we'll start with you.
Well, I can't tell you, but there's a reason why. Because I can't pronounce his name.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Mr. Mixoplex. Mystic. Anyway, the thing is that he was one of my favorite when I was reading comics as a kid because, first of all, I couldn't pronounce it. But secondly, because nobody could pronounce it.
Right.
And yet Batman. And yet Superman had to trick him into saying his name. I mean, that was the only way to beat him because he was all magic and Superman doesn't have any powers against magic. He had to trick him into saying his own name for him to go away. So that's what it sort of made him my favorite. I just thought, what a cool little oddball character.
And can you describe the character a little bit? Because I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
he's a little like kind of sprite.
like a little imp kind of guy with sprouts of hair for the gray hair to the side, and he always dressed up in this little
bowler cap, right?
Odd little Robin Hood like thing,
but super powerful, right?
Yeah,
like incredibly
extremely
powerful.
powerful. He could do anything with magic.
Okay,
it was from some alternate dimension. You know, that was back before we had the multiverse. It was just alternate dimensions, you know. But I always thought he would create all kinds of havoc, and Superman had to deal with him. But he couldn't just pick him up and beat him up, you know, or throw him in a cell. No, because he had no power over him whatsoever. So he had to trick him into saying his name.
That's one of the great things, you know, that's a perfect villain for Superman, right? Because Superman's just so strong, you can't be throwing kryptonite at him all the time.
Right.
So to have somebody who is able to sort of deal with him in a different way, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I'll take a different tact. I'll go with a villain in the category of who could maybe go blow for blow with Superman. I'll go Darkseid. So Darkseid, for those who don't know, is kind of like the equivalent of Thanos in the DC universe, right? He's like a tyrannical ruler of his own alien planet, right? And so sometimes he starts looking to expand his territory and comes to Earth and comes into conflict with Superman. But I like Darkseid because it's kind of maybe a little bit of a different twist on what Superman could have been, right? Superman has all these powers, but he chooses to restrain himself and fight for the good of humanity. Yeah. And Darkseid definitely took advantage of his powers to rule. So when they come into conflict, it's fun to see Superman kind of let loose and go blow for blow. He doesn't have to hold back as he does with some of his other villains,
this guy's really super powered himself. And I also always thought, I know why he wants to come to Earth, because his planet is like this jumble of volcanoes in a hellish landscape.
Yes, it's not
like,
nice.
I wouldn't want to live there either.
Mordor times 1,000.
You're right.
You know?
Exactly.
Right.
So this was a really difficult one for me. And
you came up with the question.
And I came up with the question. I almost went with Zack Snyder, the director.
Wow.
Yeah,
Man, I
little
tell you
drum roll
what,
on
the
that one.
last scene of the extended Justice League where Superman and Batman are fighting, that just didn't seem
yeah, I
right to
know.
me. That seemed totally out of character.
Well, it didn't make any sense.
Right.
Why would Superman suddenly... It just didn't make sense. Sorry.
Yeah. So for me, I would actually go along the lines of Darkseid. I think I like General Zod. General Zod, he was this guy, another survivor from the doomed planet of Krypton. Right. He escaped. Well, he didn't really escape. He was thrown in prison right before Krypton blew up, and so he and Superman clash.
Yeah, that was
plenty.
another alternate dimension sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because he was in a prison that was separate from the world.
Yeah. But I like that sort of, one of the things that I like about these superhero, supervillain clashes is sort of that mirror imagery. Oftentimes the best villains are sort of mirrors of the heroes that they're going against. And General Zod really feels like that mirror to me of Superman. Sort of this Krypton guy who is just plain evil. Just probably a little bit weaker.
But who doesn't
Superman.
think himself evil?
Exactly.
He thinks his cause is a righteous one.
Yeah.
Even though he's just a villain who wants to kill everybody in a way.
Well, and that makes a compelling villain when you can actually see the guy as a villain, but you say, but I kind of get what he's saying. Yeah. That's where good villainy hits, right? So anyway, thanks guys. So let's just dive right into this conversation here. We live in a world obviously filled with superheroes. The Cineplex is filled with superhero movies even to this day.
Yep.
But Superman, he was the original. He was the guy who started the whole thing.
Yeah.
Without Superman, there would be no Batman, there would be no Iron Man. The MCU would definitely not exist. He showed up.
It's really weird to think about that. I mean, because it's hard for us to imagine. We have so many superheroes that back then, I mean, they had crime fighter comics. Like they even had the Green Hornet back then. But superheroes, never, for some reason, they never thought about them.
Yeah. And so the very first one out of the box is Superman, who really became the template for all superheroes, right?
Yeah.
He was such a huge deal. He started off in 1938. He was part of radio shows and television shows, and even had a Broadway play made after him that was nominated for Tonys. And as Brett, you well know, you could argue that it sort of kicked off the whole cinematic superhero rush in 1978.
Yes.
With the original Superman starring Christopher
Superman the
Reeve.
movie, with Christopher Reeve,
Yeah. But it is sort of strange because I do believe that while Superman might have been the first and he still might be the most recognizable superhero, he's not thought of in the same way that he was maybe, say, in the 1950s and 60s. In this more cynical 21st century landscape, we like our superheroes a little bit grim. We like them complex. We like them. Sometimes it can be hard to tell, who's a superhero and who's a supervillain. Just earlier this year, talking about the Thunderbolts.
Yeah.
It was sort of interesting because even Henry Cavill, who played Superman really well, I think, in the Zack Snyder movies, he acknowledged that the guy he was playing was a bit of a superhero outcast these days. He said, as much as everyone says that Superman is good, a lot of other people might say that that's why they find him boring. A lot of Batman fans may say that. So, first up, the first natural question is Superman boring?
Well, as a Batman fan, I'll say no. Superman is not boring, right? He's a good character that I think oftentimes has a unique character in his goodness, right? He fills a certain role. He's not going to be existing in the same type of stories as a Batman character, or even like to jump the fence to Marvel, like a Spider-Man character, something like that, right? But I think he's just been let down by some of the situations and stories that he's been put in.
Oh, that's interesting.
I really do. I think that sometimes people have a hard time comprehending with Superman because we can just feel, oh, well, he's got all the powers, right? So what can he do? That's not interesting at all.
Right.
But like we talked about in the Icebreaker, there are characters that have been created
Yeah.
that really can challenge Superman, right? And so I think it just takes that kind of creative perspective to say, like, okay, how are we making the situation around Superman interesting, right? How does a good character confront difficult issues, right, and still rise above it?
Well, I agree. I agree. And just to that point, I think you could look at our movie industry in general, and that's the same failing. It's not necessarily the characters, it's the writers. The writers aren't coming up with good stuff. I remember as a kid, for example, I was a comic book fan. And so when I had my allowance, or later when I had my paper route, and I would take my money every Friday and I'd go over and buy my stash of comics. It wasn't always a lot, but there were 3 comics that were always there. There was the Metal Men. I liked Metal Men. I've never even heard them probably.
No.
Batman and then Superman. And actually, if I was limited to one, it would be the Superman comic. And my reasoning was because the writing was really good in the Superman comics of that age. You had Superman could do anything and go anywhere. And so the writers were thinking, okay, where can we put him that's new and fresh and interesting? He can go into outer space. He can lift anything, but he also has to use his ability to outfox these enemies. Like he had to outthink Brainiac. He had to outmaneuver Metallo. By the way, Metallo is the robot powered by a kryptonite heart. So, I mean, he had to do all these things because the villains they created limited him. And he had to figure a new way to beat them.
And I think that's key because so often we hear that, hey, heroes are defined by their villains, right? And so if you're not, if you don't have these villains to challenge the hero in some unique way, that's when things can start to get a little dull. But Superman has these villains. Just sometimes they're not used in the best way, I would say.
Yeah. So let me ask you
For example, with James Gunn, who's coming up with a whole brand new stash of villains that we've never heard of. Why not use Metallo or whatever? But anyway, sorry.
No, I think that's a valid point, right? But it'll be really interesting to see what James Gunn does with this, and he's done some really effective movies in the past. He's done the Guardian of the Galaxies movies.
Which was excellent,
yeah, they have a lot of emotional resonance. So for that, I'm kind of curious to see what he does with this. But I do think that there is probably a group of fans who would say Superman is kind of boring, not just because he has all these powers, right? And not just because the writing is not necessarily always tip-top, but because he's just too good. Is that an issue? And let me actually just springboard over to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There is a person who is a member of our team, who I will not mention their name, although it rhymes with Driston. It was she has always I've talked with her about sort of the Captain America Iron Man thing, right? And she has always said Captain America, he's just so boring because he's so squeaky clean. I think that the same thing could be said for Superman potentially.
Oh, sure.
Is goodness a hard sell? Is goodness hard to make compelling in stories?
I think it is a little bit more in this day and age. Not back when it first started. I think it's because of that. Well, okay, our society has always had this tug and pull between faith and humanism, in my opinion. And faith being the faith that God is all-powerful and in control of our lives. And humanism is more of a faith that human reason and human agency and the changing human ethics rule all, okay? And as our society has gone on, we've become more affluent, let's put it that way. And as we've become more affluent, our parents, like when my parents of that age were always saying, everybody's got to go to college. You got to go to college. Why? Because then become more affluent. But when you go to college isn't necessarily a place of faith. It's more of reason. Okay, now I know I'm getting really complicated in the weeds, but
Superman's in there somewhere.
what my point is that we as a society are leaning more and more toward humanism, more and more toward digging into the complexity of life and little tiny issues and pulling at the strings of things. And so something as black and white as a good person who always does the right thing and does the right thing and has the power to back up that right thing, I can see how our society might find that a little bit boring, but I think from a certain perspective, those kinds of characters can also be a beacon. They can be someone who does the right thing, and we say, okay, now that's the way you should be. And I think so for parents, somebody like a Captain America or a Superman can be a very positive icon that we can hold up.
Yeah.
And I think that those characters can be very, very positive, but where the boring thing comes in for me is when a character faces a lack of challenge, right? Whether they're a really good character, a paragon of justice, or whether they're a little more complicated, right? If a character does not face any conflict, any challenges to their personal beliefs, we're there to watch them overcome those things.
Right.
Right. That's the catharsis.
That's good drama.
That's
right?
good drama. That's the catharsis that we're seeking in films. So, I think of what was done with Captain America. I know some people might think he was boring too, but I felt like, especially some of the early movies, really put him in situations where he had to kind of confront his own principles in the face of a new world. Literally, he was a man pulled out of time, and yet he still was able to hold on to really just that integrity of goodness that he had. And I truly believe that Superman has the same type of potential.
Yeah.
It's very, I like what you just said. And I think the Marvel universe, the reason why it's become less palatable is because Marvel had always introduced characters that were all powerful. They got to the point where, the villain could eat a universe, and when you have these all powerful characters, how do you connect with them? How do you do a good drama with something that is impossibly powerful? And that's why I never really liked Marvel stuff all that much. And that's and probably why, in my opinion, after that first, what did they call it? The
phase one.
Phases after
right.
that first phase of the central heroes from the Golden Age, they started getting into some of these others, and you just go, okay, I don't care.
Yeah. It is interesting because I do think that when you're talking about these all-powerful heroes, these all-powerful villains, that's one of the reasons why I think Batman is so popular, right? Because he's sort of this grounded hero who we can relate to.
And he's constantly struggling.
With that
good and evil.
When you look at Superman, he's almost the antithesis of that, right? He is this all-powerful, godlike being who is meant to be incorruptible. And so he can be a hard character to sort of embrace, right?
Yeah.
He's supposed to be aspirational. Really.
Exactly.
That's his purpose, right? Is we see him, again, he has struggles, he has things that he goes through too, but he rises above them, right? And so I think that there is that element, and maybe some people might be turned away by the fact, well, I can never be that good, right? And I find more relatability in other characters, and that's totally legitimate and fine.
Right.
But Superman as a character is aspirational, right? He's not only Superman from like a physical standpoint with all these powers, but he is a Superman of sorts from a moral perspective as well.
Yeah.
And I do think that in this time, this day and age, it's really nice to have that true cornerstone of goodness to look at, right?
Yeah.
Because the world can be just so complex.
Well, I was talking to somebody about this, and I said, what do you think of Superman? And he said, well, I think of him as the good all-American boy. Thinking back to Superboy and all that, and how he grew, we've seen him grow up from that. And I thought, that's another reason why some people may find Superman boring, because in our day and age, being all-American isn't necessarily good. There are a lot of people who look at America and say, "Oh, the evil of America" and all that sort of thing. But there are others who look at our society and the culture that we've built and they praise it and think this is a wonderful country. And so calling him the good all-American boy could bother some, but others find it, as you said, aspirational.
Well, and I also love that a lot of Superman's moral foundation came from his human upbringing.
Right.
I think that's
Small town America, grew up in Kansas just like you did, Brad.
Midwest nice.
Yeah.
Midwest nice to the nth degree, right? And yeah, okay, again, some people may find that boring, but I think that is a really cool aspect of his character. Here is this super-powered alien, and he just happens to land in one of the places where, this loving family raises him and teaches him good morals and values that become that kind of North Star for him to live up to and then serve humanity.
And that's the big difference between him and his cousin. Is it Kara? Kara, is that how you pronounce her name?
Supergirl?
Supergirl.
Yeah.
She was not raised on good old American Earth. She was raised on Krypton and came here as a teenager. And so her values and the way she looks at the world around her is different from her cousins.
You know, it's kind of interesting just as you're talking, because it does feel like it plays into that nature versus nurture discussion, right? And here at Focus on the Family, we really are all about family and how a good family can help your sons and daughters grow up to be really good Christ-honoring men and women. And it does feel like the whole narrative of Superman, it's sort of confirmation of that in a sort of fictional sense, because yes, he got all of his superpowers because he was born on Krypton, but he became the hero that he is because of his upbringing.
Right.
And if I could just add one other thing, just in comparison to, say, the popularity or the opinion of Superman now versus, maybe 30s, 40s, 50s, kind of the heyday, right? I think now, too, we are a little afraid of sincerity. When it comes to goodness, right? Because we can think, that's maybe that's a little cheesy. Like, I don't know about that, right? And we've been giving Marvel their flowers a little bit in this conversation, but I also want to point out a detriment that I think Marvel contributed to movies being like, well, you can't have a genuine moment and have kind of that emotional feel without like a quippy joke,
right?
To break the tension, kind of a thing. It's like, no, you just need to let it sit sometimes. Don't be afraid of having those like cathartic moments where, hey, this is allow the audience to feel that genuine goodness or love for that characters may have for one another. You don't have to insert a joke every 5 seconds, right? And I think that reveals kind of a fear of sincerity nowadays. Whereas maybe back in the day, in Superman's heyday, let's say, people weren't as afraid of that, and they were looking more toward an aspirational character.
As you're talking about that, it really does make me think that Superman, one of the things that does make him relatable, he's a geek. And by that I mean when you geek out about something, you love something without apology, right? You dig this thing. And Superman is a little like that with humanity. He really buys into that whole thing. Truth, justice, the American way.
That's why Henry Cavill was such a great Superman.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because we were talking about this yesterday because Henry Cavill, he is also a geek.
Yeah, unapologetic.
Right? So that makes him really good. He plays board games. He plays video games. He has quit The Witcher because he wasn't following.
It strayed from source material.
It strayed from source material. So that made him an effective.
Of course,
Superman
he was also strikingly handsome, but
Well, there you go. but you do have this geeky quality that he is just such an honest to goodness good guy, and maybe just those of us who really passionately love things, who love things that maybe other people sort of turn their noses up at, maybe we can relate to that a little bit. So let me ask one final question as we bring this conversation to a close. Why is Superman still important today? Why do we keep still making movies about him, and what should those movies look like?
Well, first of all, I would say I hope that James Gunn doesn't go in negative directions with his version, because he wanted to start from scratch with a younger Superman. And I'm hoping he doesn't go in opposition to what Superman has always represented. And that, I would say that. Because I think you're right. We do need those kinds of heroes that are true heroes, the people that we can aspire to, the people that we can look at and say, you know, if I were a superhero, I'd want to be like that. I'd want to make those kinds of choices. And I think that's why he needs to still be around. I mean, there's nothing against Batman. I love the Batman character, and I love that he wrestles with those inner demons of his own. But I also do like a hero that can stand up, the kind of hero that he stands up and glows with the sun. You know, that's where he gets his power. Everything comes from the idea behind Superman is that he was this character that would absorb all the goodness and be able to shine that back to the people who watch and see him.
Yeah, I think Bob nailed it. I mean, Superman's important because we still need good characters, right? And we still need morally upright characters and fictional characters that we can aspire to, really. All those other characters, Batman, Spider-Man, all these other superheroes, they fill different roles that, again, are legitimate. Those are going to be other people's favorites. But we still need Superman. And I don't think you can ever outgrow that.
Yeah, I love that. I wasn't going to go here in this conversation, but I did want to just riff on what you were talking about. He glows with the sun, reflects it out to humanity. We may have talked about this on a previous podcast, but Superman's original name back on Krypton was Kal-El. And there are a lot of people who see that, and they see a Jewish translation that means the voice of God. There's always been a messianic quality with Superman. He has always been this visitor from another world who came to show us, goodness, who came to save us, right? And
we've seen that reflected in some of the films, too.
And we've seen
some
that
imagery,
reflected.
Anyway.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see. Obviously, by the time you hear this, our review of Superman will be up. When we're talking about it, we haven't seen it. But when we talk about the character of Superman, I think that moms and dads might have some fruitful conversations about what is goodness. What does it mean to be a good character? What does it mean to be a good person?
That's a great point.
So,
I mean, because families will go see this film, and I think that's a great lead-in question that parents can ask after seeing it.
Yeah.
What does this mean to you, and who is this character? How does it relate to you?
Yeah.
And the choices you make every day.
Yeah. And we would love to hear from anybody listening who is asking themselves that same question, who has answers to that question. And tell us how those conversations with your kids go. Thanks so much, guys.
You bet.
Hey, look up there in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
No, it actually is a bird.
Oh, well, that's disappointing.
I know, right? I was expecting something a little more dramatic but hold on. Can it be? Yes, it is. It's
Gunther Harrington at your service. Pleased to meet you. Just passing through. Hey, you know how much further to the next episode?
Episode? We don't know anything about an episode. We're in the middle of Smallburg, Iowa.
That's right. Our local bank has just been robbed, and we're waiting for a superhero to fly in and save the day. And here you are.
Fly? Oh, no. I came in on the bus over yonder. I ain't no superhero.
But the cape.
Cape? Heavens, no. This is my Aunt Matilda's shawl. She's in the next episode over, and I'm trying to get it back to her. It was just a mite chilly.
But the tights.
Hey, listen here. I admit I've put on a little weight, but that's no way to talk to a stranger.
So you're not here to save us?
Save you? I'm not in the business of saving people. But you know who is? The Plugged-In Team.
The Plugged-In Team?
Is there an echo in here? Yes, the Plugged-In Team. Take a look at this here book. Becoming a Screen-Savvy Family.
Well, sure, it's a nice-looking book, but I don't see how that'll save anybody.
You gotta read the thing, mister. That's how books work. You start reading this, and before you know it, you'll be saving your kids from all sorts of entertainment and technology perils.
Why, Buford, I do believe this gentleman
Gunther Harrington.
is right. If only the parents of those crooks had read this book, they surely wouldn't have turned to a life of crime.
If only we could afford to buy those robbers their very own honest copies.
But you can! Just send a gift of any amount to Plugged In. All you need do is look at the episode show notes to find out how.
There he goes, talking about episodes again.
Oh, bless you, stranger. You are a superhero.
No, just a man with his aunt's shawl, doing his civic duty. Now, where'd you say the next episode was again?
So I've got a confession to make. I am a terrible Mario Kart player. My kids actually used to love playing Mario Kart with me just because I was so
bad.
And the noises I would make as I would drive into a banana or drive off a cliff or whatever.
Rainbow Road is tough.
Rainbow Road, it's the worst. So there is a new version of Mario Kart out right now on Nintendo's Switch 2. Mr. Hoos, you have reviewed the actual game.
Yep.
And so tell us, will I like this version any better than the past ones?
Well, you might. You might. See, I was never a fan of the game myself.
Really?
But I found this new version to be really fun. And I think a lot of it has to do with the new Switch. Because the Switch... See, the problem with Mario Kart from my perspective as a gamer was that it was always sending a lot of information for the little Switch console to try and process. And so there were glitches and there were things that would happen, and it just wasn't as smooth as I wanted it to be. Whereas with the new console, it's got the upgraded CPU and GPU, and it's got, it really works well, first of all. The game, and what is the game, by the way? In case you've never heard of a Mario Kart game, it's a racing game. And it's a racing game that incorporates all of Mario and all of the Mario adjacent characters. Basically, it starts out with a small pool of characters, and as you race, you get more and more characters revealed that you can play as. You can be Peach, you can be Yoshi, or whatever you want. And then more and more vehicles that you can race in. And some of the vehicles are... They all sort of feel like, okay, it's the same thing, right? No, actually, the vehicles have slight differences in how they
can
work.
be a little more tank-like. They
Yeah,
can
yeah.
build
And,
speedier.
and based on how they're built, I mean, if you control a snowmobile-like thing, it's going to be great in snow. Or if it's got wings on the side of your vehicle, when you go over a ramp, you'll glide more.
See, that's what I need.
So, so I mean, those kinds of things, you keep those things in mind as you play, and whatever the race courses look like. And this game is based on sort of like a big open map with lots of little racetracks all around the map. And so then you go through the racetracks, and there are different levels. 50cc, 100cc, 150cc, the different levels of difficulty, and you just race through them all, and it's really fun. It's a fun game, and they've got. We don't even need to belabor most of it because people know what a Mario Kart game is, but it's that and more. It's got some new elements in there, like for example, because of the new setup and the new power of the Switch 2, you can have up to 23 friends playing the game with you at the same time.
At the same
Okay.
time.
At the same time. Now, that's a lot of Switch 2s, of course.
Man.
I'm sure they say, go get all your friends and let them buy one, too.
Buy two. Yeah.
But it's, but I mean, really, and you can keep track of 23 people in one race.
Wow. Man,
It's
oh, man.
massive.
That's wild.
But it's really fun. Oh, and by the way, another aspect of Mario Kart that's different, and you referred to it, that's different from a regular racing game, is that you're looking for speed boosts, first of all, to get your guy going fastest, but you're also throwing things at the other players.
Yes.
So you throw a
So annoying.
turtle shell, a banana peel,
Yeah.
a
Ink.
fireball.
The ink was
Yeah.
always the worst. You
So
can
they
squirt like
they can't
octopus
see,
ink.
The dreaded blue shell.
Yeah. So those kinds of elements are what make it fun,
Yep.
and it is every bit that. Let's see, other pluses. Well, one of the things that I thought I really liked, they've got this new element in there. It's called the Knockout Tour. And it essentially links all of these different racetracks together in one big race. And it's an elimination race. So you're in there and you're racing with
So you're actually racing this one race.
It's like one long race. But
So not a series.
as
That's
you go
interesting.
through each track, though, it eliminates people at the back of the pack. So you want to stay up in the top as much as possible so that you can actually end up being the last person standing
That's a fun idea.
at the last race. And it was really fun. It was one of those that you didn't have to have your friends there. You could play on your own.
Yeah. Let me ask a question because so my wife and I actually 2-3 weeks ago we busted out the old GameCube and we started playing Mario Kart Double Dash, right? Which is one that I grew up with, the 64 version and then the GameCube version. And we played through it and we did all of the races in about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously Mario Kart it trends toward replayability and playing with friends, everything. Does the open world aspect of this game and some of the other things they've added kind of add to what is there?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think the complexity of some of the races is a little different from like the early games. And you know, as I said, that 50cc, 100cc, 150cc just makes the races more difficult. And by the way, the cc is about the size of the engine that the vehicle uses. But as far as that open world thing, in this new game, you can decide to, okay, I don't want to race. And you go off the cart and you can drive anywhere in the world.
Oh, wow.
You can drive your little cart up the side of buildings. You can drive all over the place. You can get up on the back of a train as the train is going by. And you just sit there and watch, you know, with the scenery going by you.
I could have used that this morning.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. You can hear. But I mean, there are little fun elements like that they've added into this, especially now that we're working with a new console to sort of broaden the appeal.
Yeah, yeah. So one final question.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mario Kart is not a particularly problematic game, except for just anger at people throwing banana peels at you.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but are there any other additional problems that parents would need to worry about?
Well, the biggest one is that. The banana peel sort of thing, because some younger racers will probably get a little frustrated. Like they're coming in for the win. They're coming in with it. They get hit with a shell.
Yeah.
Mom, what are you doing?
So that could be frustrating for some players. But I think the only other thing to keep track of is the fact that the new console has a built-in mic system. And it allows players, like if you have 23 friends, they can all talk to each other while they're racing. And you don't have to have any headsets, so you just use the console itself. And some parents may not be all that keen on that, on having, you know, like if they're racing with strangers, having them be able to talk to people. The good thing is you can turn it off. So, but that's just one thing to be aware of.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Hoos.
You bet.
All right, and now it is time for our game segment, even though we're not actually doing games today. We are doing dad jokes.
Oh,
There you
And
Yay.
we'll give you extra credit if you do a Superman dad joke.
oh yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, it needs to be Superman.
Are you out of luck?
I'm out of luck.
Oh, man.
Well.
Well, you go first since you just lost.
Okay.
So
It is a game after all.
We
It
can
is a
boo you.
All right, fine. Here's my dad joke. How many tickles does it take to make a squid laugh?
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
How many tickles does it take to make a squid laugh? I have no idea.
10 tickles.
Oh.
Womp, womp, womp. And so you can imagine Superman tickling the squid if you really want to tie it in with our
thank you. That was a terrible save, but we'll give you credits for effort.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Hoos.
Where does Superman go for his vacation?
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna guess it's Cape Town.
Yes!
Oh,
You got it. Good
Nice.
for you. Cape
Wow.
Town.
Nicely done.
Okay, so why is it easy for Superman to jump higher than buildings?
Why?
Because buildings don't jump.
But
Bum.
that is a dead joke.
That's a
right
good
there.
one.
That is a,
Yeah.
So,
fine.
and here's an extra credit one for you because I couldn't resist.
Okay.
So-
I've got a few too.
Yeah. This will keep going if you let it.
So what does Superman invest in?
What?
Cryptocurrency.
Ah.
There you go. All right. And with that, we will bring this episode to a close. Well, kind of. We do have some other stuff to talk about, but thank you so much for joining us today on the Plugged In Show. We'd love to hear from you on Facebook and Instagram and, of course, on YouTube. You can also send us an email at team@thepluggedinshow.com. You can leave us a voicemail at the Plugged In Show homepage, or you can leave some thoughts on the blog, which is where we received this post from an anonymous listener. He had some thoughts about episode 292, where we talked about youth finding church again. What did that person say?
He said, "Thank you for your podcast. It is encouraging to hear more Gen Z men are going to church. It's very sad Gen Z women are not going. I don't know about other millennials, but the main obstacle for me going to church is that I usually have to work on Saturday nights at the hospital, and I get off work around 7:30 a.m. If I can shower fast enough, I can make it to an early service sometimes before falling asleep. But I sometimes fall asleep in church, and I usually have to sleep in my car before driving home, which is hard in the summer and winter months. Usually I can't remember the sermon or any of the names of the people who introduced themselves to me because of fatigue. I did find a church that has an evening service, but I seem to be the only millennial who comes, so it is very lonely."
Yeah, that can be tricky, right?
Yeah.
Finding a good community, it can be hard to find a good church community. But thank you so much for sharing. We really love to hear what you think. We would love to hear from all of you, and that will never, ever change. But the Plugged In Show itself is changing. In fact, it is going away. The 300th episode will be our very last. That will be airing on August 21st. We're on episode 294 now, just so you know. And we really did not come to this decision lightly. It takes a great deal of work. It takes a great deal of time to put these shows together. And quite honestly, the listenership was just not at the level that we really felt like we could
We
justify
needed more
continuing.
Gen Z men and women.
Why? But of course, while the Plugged In Show is going away, Plugged In is not going anywhere. And we have always loved the conversations that we've had through here, through nearly 300 episodes now. This has been one of the funnest parts of my job, actually, to sit here, have these conversations. We don't want that dialogue to go away. So we'll probably be looking at creating new forums for this kind of conversation to talk about important things, entertainment, technology, how we can help your kids navigate this culture of ours.
Absolutely.
So that we'll probably be pushing more and more resources toward YouTube, our YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out in the future. What exactly that'll look like, we'll probably tell you a little bit more as these last few episodes roll out. But of course, we still have a few episodes to go. And next week, we've got a great one for you when we sit down and talk about something called the Jesus Glow. And we'll also take a look at a surprisingly long-lasting franchise, the Smurfs.
And
So,
who knows, if you bring in thousands of friends in the meantime to listen to us, the show may go on.
you never know. But if you're feeling blue about the Plugged In Show going away, you'll have plenty of company in our next episode, since we're talking about the Smurfs
That's right.
on the Plugged In Show.